Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here, and I'm very honored to be among the great speakers that you've had, one of which is sitting here, maybe more, but it's a great honor to be here. And my topic, of course, is community honoring diversity and inclusion. There's been a book published recently by the newer, younger members of Religious Life, and the first chapter, written by Virginia Herbers, she was asked, what does she like best about community life? No, she asked, what does she like best about religious life? And she said, community. Then she was asked, well, what do you find most difficult about religious life? And she said, community. See, you already know the talk. We all long to belong, to know where we're from, who we are, and whose we are. Even when we went through those years, when we pushed up against family and institutions to find ourselves, we still yearn to belong, to be included, and to count, to feel welcome and safe in a group. As you have considered and are considering over these talks on Dominican call, you know there are 4 pillars of Dominican life: prayer, study, community, and ministry. And each feed each other. Each pillar is needed to support the whole. Now, I've lived in religious community life for 50 plus years. I know I don't look that old, but I have. But like you, before I joined religious life, I lived in a family. I belonged to a school community, not that one, but I belonged to a parish community, a neighborhood, various clubs, social, service, sports, study, great books, Girl Scouts. And all influenced me, and hopefully I influenced them. Now, the groups I belong to, the communities I've belonged to, some of which have changed over the years. I chose Dominican community life because of the relationship with the sisters. And I saw something they had I wanted. As I grew in age and religious life, and hopefully wisdom, that initial desire grew and matured, and I desired to live with the deep, lasting relationships to do good for God, to live a life of mission together. It's all about relationships. We are brothers and sisters in mission. And community supports us, challenges us, and stretches us if we're willing and come with open hands and open hearts. If we're willing to influence and be influenced. As time went on, I learned about Dominic de Guzman, and he brilliantly wove into the fabric of the order prayer, study, and service. But they would be bound together by community because we have common prayer, common study, and common ministries. Even when we are doing different ministries spread all over the country, in different parts of the world, where one Dominican is, we're all there. So I'm not on the faculty and staff at ODU, but my heart is, and our sisters are, and so the Dominicans are here, and all of you associates are. So the Dominicans are here. You and I know that relationships are complicated. and that most authentic relationships tell us the truth, the good news and the challenging news. You get honest feedback from your true friends. Think for a minute. Who tells you the truth? Who will give you honest feedback? Most recently, I was a co-director at the Collaborative Dominican Novitiate in St. Louis. That's where women who are interested in exploring and living Dominican life as a sister come for a year. We live in community, and as much as we have experienced community in families, schools, clubs, this is a unique and sometimes startling experience. We were blessed and challenged to have persons of various cultures among us. Romanian, Hungarian, Mexican, Vietnamese, Indian, African, a variety of African countries, and American. And you and I know that just because you come from the United States, you're not exactly the same culture. So we have some people here from the East, and we have some people here from the South. And they're very different. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if you know Ana Gonzalez. She's one of our sisters. She just renewed her vows, or made first vows. And I was going to give a talk at the Novitiate on culture, and I said, now, Ana, I'm going to use you an example. She wouldn't be embarrassed, but I wanted to warn her. And I'm going to say to you, what do you say when I ask you a question? And she screwed up her face like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, the sister from Fort Wayne, Indiana, was standing next to us. She says, well, I know the answer to that. And Ana said, well, what? And she said, you say, yes, ma'am. I said, well, you grew up in El Paso, Texas. Of course you would say yes, ma'am. But Fort Wayne wouldn't, nor would Boston. It's like normative for a Southerner to grow up, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sister, no, sister. In fact, when I moved from Kentucky to Chicago when I was teaching fourth grade, I asked one of the children a question. He said, yep. And I got my good teacher look on, put my hand on my hip, and I said, yep, what? He had no idea. I could tell on his face. He had no idea what I was talking about. So it was sort of like a mirror to me. And I started laughing, and I said, don't worry about it. It's my culture. It's not yours. He didn't have a clue, but I did. I realized I had switched cultures in the United States. So when you experience cultural diversity, you know it's enriching, but it's also challenging. It requires cultural and verbal sensitivity. So we would often have conversations about, and how do you celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas? How do you celebrate birthdays? Because it's different. How do you express joy or sorrow? What do you eat? Who is God for you? What does support look like for you? Who do you describe as family? We have Vietnamese in our community, and extended family is family. Now that's probably true for some of you. That wasn't true for me. Family was the more nuclear. But for some people, extended family, neighborhoods are family. So it's important to have that conversation. What does that mean? Growing in a community is seeing what is visible, but also taking the long journey to discover what is inside and not always seen. What's below the waterline, the iceberg. Most likely you've had this experience in encountering students and faculty here at ODU. Respect for culture is critical in community. As members of a faith community and as members of a global community, we're invited to reach out, to include, to explore various perspectives. And in that reaching out and reaching across, we're stretched. When we stretch, when we purposely include others. So I'd like you to think for a minute of an experience that you've had here or elsewhere where the other has stretched you. And you think of an experience where someone has stretched you. You didn't think about that before. Like Anna didn't realize that she said yes, ma'am, but Catherine realized it. And that's little. Can you think of an example? Can you think of an example when someone's reached out to include you? That you weren't sure you belonged, but somebody reached out and included you? How many of you are on Facebook? Okay. If you're on Facebook, you've seen many touching stories of reaching out to others. To refugees, to veterans, to victims of wildfire, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, to elders, to youngsters, to people suffering from human trafficking, to those bullied or tormented, to the disabled, the homeless, the hungry, the lonely, to the new kid on the block, to the other. And what I find the touching part of these stories are, they include people's response of how they are enriched as they are helping someone else. That it's a mutual experience. Now, I know there are a lot of service projects and a lot of outreach projects. And usually it's the person that's different than you, or a place or country or situation that's different to you. If you've reached across the boundaries, what did you learn from that experience? I'd let you share that with one other person. What did you learn from reaching out to someone that's other? Perhaps we can share one or two things that we heard or said we learned. Yes?
Can't afford to be judgmental.
Ah, good. Can everybody hear that?
Yes.
Okay. That's a great learning. That's a hard learning, but it's a great learning. Anything else you learned?
Expect surprises.
Expect surprises. Good, thank you.
To the point of being judgmental, I think sometimes you can let your preconceived notions falsely be fact. Like you believe it to be true.
Right. That's great. What a great awareness. And that blocks us from the truth. Yeah, wonderful. Over the years, I've worked with ministers of care and those doing service like yourself. And I constantly hear from them. In serving others, we're served. In giving to others, I thought I was giving to them, but I was blessed. Because bonds were formed, and mutual appreciation and care is there. And reaching out and bringing into our heart their stories enrich us. Their perspectives enrich us. We are changed. We are influenced. We honor diversity. We honor inclusion. It's a gift, and it's the challenge of community. We also learn this from nature. A bouquet of flowers is more beautiful with the diversity of blossoms. The interconnectedness of trees. We're learning how the trees communicate in ways that we don't understand it, but we're just learning it from science. And the animals, uniqueness in the inner communion of all of life. And Jesus prayed that they all may be one. And we try to make that prayer come to life. Jesus did not say that they all be alike, or they all are like me. Jesus embraced difference and brought them all to the table. We see in Pope Francis, who reaches out to the margins, to those forgotten or the outcasts, and literally pulls them into his embrace. That all may be one, that all may be included, that all may belong, that all are welcome. We all want to know who we are and whose we are. We all want to belong. We all want to be included. Well, you do belong. You are welcome. And you're invited to assure others that they belong too, that they are also welcome. That's what it means to be authentic. Community's not easy. We have to be nourished by it and to nourish it. We have to work for it, not take it for granted, never underestimate its power, because in the end, it's what gives us life and calls us to our truest self. It's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. And you're invited to ask questions if you wish, and if you need to leave, I understand that. I'm watching your clock, and I'll hang around for a while, so it's been a pleasure to be with you. Yes?
What is the total community number?
I don't know.
424.
I should have known exactly who to ask.
When we began, we were 650. So you can see over the years how the death rate has caught up with us.
And we're getting more in. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, so we heard that the hardest thing about religious life is, or the best thing about one of the great things about religious life is community, and one of the hardest things is community. What's been the best and the hardest things in community for you?
Oh, let's see. I feel so blessed. I have lived in wonderful, rich communities, and surprisingly rich communities. Like when I was very young, and at that time we were assigned, and I'm like, I don't know these people, are they going to accept me? And, I've always been enriched. I've been enriched by elders who told stories of the old, what I thought was the old days. They really weren't that old. But so I got history and wisdom, and then I had people around my age, and I got energy and enthusiasm and creativity. So I've been really lucky. I had to learn the blessing of diversity. It didn't come packaged. So that's been the great grace. I think the hardest thing about community is when you move. I have just lots of friends in Louisville, Kentucky, and I have a lot of friends in St. Louis, and I'm here. So I have to spend time and energy and focus to keep those connections. And you can't keep them all, but it's just really important for me to make time for those relationships, because that's the richest part of my life is relationship. Well, prayer is, I can't say it's the most. That's why Dominic was brilliant in the 4 pillars, because they're all important, but community holds it all together for me. Good question. Yeah, Rose.
I'm from New Orleans.
I know.
We
we always celebrated Mardi Gras in Kentucky. But when the sisters from New Orleans came up at Katrina, we knew we had never celebrated it adequately. I mean, from the minute we woke up, there on the TV was a parade, and then there was the jesters, and then we had people in the wheelchairs and the, what do you call it, the floats, and I mean, throwing the balloons and the beads, and we ate king cake every Tuesday from Epiphany to Mardi Gras. I mean, it was, I learned so much. What I thought I knew, you know, you think you know, I had no clue. And then there was a whole spirituality of Mardi Gras, which I never knew about until we had the opportunity to interface with the sisters that lived there and were from there. Boy, I learned a lot. And I'm sure you learned a lot about the horses from the Kentuckians. And the bourbon. Oh, I'm on TV.
We have bookies and all.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Coming over now.
Yeah. Yes, Michelle.
I think one of the biggest experiences for all of us, those of us that are sisters here, was living through and experiencing Vatican II. Okay? Though some of you were too young, probably you were born before that, after Vatican II. But living through the changes and seeing the changes within our own communities and adjusting to those, and also the changes within the church.
Right.
It was really quite an experience during the 60s.
It was a real shift in culture, you know, with all the exterior trappings, but the interior, the iceberg. You know, you might have seen the statues removed, but there was so much under the ground. That's good. Yeah.
For Founders Day here, when the president gave the homily, he was talking about the difference, habit and no habit. He said it's not the sisters in the habit, it's the ones that have a Dominican heart. And that can go to all of us.
Right. Right. And I'm sure being on this campus, you're absorbing that and growing in that yourselves. It doesn't have to have a SR in first. So. Well, I know, you know, my timekeeper's there. But it's been lovely to be with you. And I know you just are coming back from your break, so have a wonderful second semester.